Welcome to an overview of the services available on the Ecessa solutions. The purpose of this video is to provide a summary of the services and describe available configuration options. If you have specific questions about the interface overall, I'd encourage you to reach out to our support staff who are always happy to be of assistance. After logging into the GUI, services can be accessed under the Basic Setup section. We'll be focusing on the Services tab itself, as options such as alerts will be covered under the topic of reporting. So, let's take a look at the available options. First, we have the Advanced Session Load Balancing, which is enabled by default. This function enables the intelligent load balancing algorithm on the available WAN connections. With this feature unchecked, the Ecessa device will simply alternate paths in a round-robin fashion, not taking into account capacity or utilization. Generally, you'll want this to remain checked. Next, we have the Recovery and Redundancy checkbox. This is also enabled by default and activates the WAN line testing function. With this disabled, WAN lines will always show as up, really only useful for testing. Note that this is also where you can configure the frequency of the tests. Spare WAN line testing applies to WAN connections that have been configured as spare lines. They normally would not require the constant, ongoing testing that a normal line might. However, you likely still want to test it occasionally to avoid nasty surprises, so you can configure the frequency of that testing here. The Delayed Line Status Reporting option was originally designed when flaky connections would flap up and down continuously. It would be problematic because that can be very disruptive to traffic. You start sending traffic over the line only to have it drop again immediately. This feature enables a wait time. It will wait for a line to be up and responsive for the time period indicated here before actually using it. The Allow ICMP drop-down box allows you to specify how the Ecessa device responds to ping traffic. You can set this to be all, WAN only, LAN only, or none. The DNS servers allow you to specify the DNS servers the Ecessa device should query. There are defaults configured for public DNS servers, although you can specify a local DNS server as well if required. By default, the Ecessa device can be accessed on the base configured IP address on each WAN line. Under Service WANs, you can specify an alternate address if needed. You can configure a management access list in order to restrict access to services, such as the Web GUI or CLI, to certain source addresses. For example, you might want to configure the administrator's home IP address. You can use either a specific IP address or an FQDN. Note that a period is required at the end of an FQDN as shown here. This feature is disabled by default, meaning access is not specifically restricted. As long as a service is enabled, it could be accessed from any address. Web settings allow you to specify the configuration and access to the web user interface. You can enable or disable a service with the relevant checkboxes, or change the port to make the device accessible on something non-standard. In addition, you can make the service accessible from the LAN side of the device, the WAN, or both. SSH settings are similar, allowing you to enable or disable access to these particular services. SSH would be a command line interface. Note that Telnet is no longer available on Ecessa devices. If you have a Syslog server where you consolidate Syslog messages from multiple networking devices, the Ecessa device can work with that environment as well. You can set the messages to normal or verbose, which includes much more information. Simply specify the protocol used by the server, UDP, TCP, or TCP and SSL, along with the address of the Syslog server and port used for communication. Finally, you can configure alert settings. You can specify a maximum number of alerts per day. Note that this is per alert type, not alerts overall. Setting this to 0 will allow unlimited alerts. The low memory alert can be configured to send out an email alert if a low memory event occurs. You can define what percentage of memory would trigger that alert here as well. And there we have a basic overview of the Ecessa appliance's service options. For additional information, please don't hesitate to contact our support department, who are always happy to assist.